Well, we're so deeply immersed between two Cooper alumni. I'm a little out of place, but that's okay. Next door, or right behind that wall, there's an exhibition, and it's really, I think it's very interesting. It's very political. It's about social engagement. It's about ways of dealing with society, and I think that's a really important aspect of the Peter Cooper legacy. One of the members of REPOHistory, we were part of that show, is Greg Shillette. He was a Cooper alumni. He still is. He's still with us. And I just want to talk a little bit about, I'll talk about our first project because that's the one in here. Then I'm going to transition to some interactive things. And I'm going to end up with something that'll be, wait a second. The outcome of what the consequences of, I would say, REPOHistory, our legacy. We started getting together in, let's see, 1989, sorry. I mean, these decades are collapsing on one another. And we were started off as a group of artists that were interested in doing public artwork, interested in doing some kind of work that dealt with social issues. And what we did was come together around the idea of repossessing history. And what history is, it's a contested thing. When you look at the Tea Party today, you understand the politics of history. George Orwell said that those who control the past control the future. And the idea, and it's not so much that history repeats itself or all these kind of cliches, but the idea of what a vision is. You have to have a vision of who you're going to be. And when people control that vision and make it totally individualistic, totally about different forms of what might be considered success, that's not a total vision of what the human race is or our history. It's a slanted vision. And so I'll just go up here and go through our first project a little bit. Let me see if I can go at this another way. There's a couple different ways of doing everything, which is the beauty of the internet and the beauty of interactivity. And oh yes, by the way, Paul Guerin hosted our first website and continues to host the website. We went to Paul in 97, 96 actually, and launched our first website and then evolved. And we stopped really operating as a group in 2000. But this was the first project, the Lower Manhattan Sign Project. It was done in conjunction with the quincentennial of the Columbus discovery, but we were actually anti-Columbus, anti-discovery. And we got to put up a public art project in Lower Manhattan because we didn't tell everybody exactly what all the signs were about, to be honest. And we also came into a situation where one of the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council had received grant money to put up something for the quincentennial, 5 borough things, and they didn't have theirs together in a way, so we walked in with a prepackaged public artwork. And we were interested in dealing with issues of class, race, gender, and sexuality. And we continued to do several projects that would be about queer spaces. Whoa, that was weird. Did I step through things? Anyway, this is the sign that I think really tells the story of our first project, the Lower Manhattan Sign Project. This top image is a Dutch print from the 1600s, and then below they kept enlarging the slave population. And this was put across the street from the first New York Stock Exchange, because across the street from the first stock exchange was a slave market. The stock exchange had a huge sign commemorating capitalism and all these other things, free markets. But then the untold story was the slave market. And in the early part of the Republic, you have to understand that New York City was the second largest slave port. Charlotte, I think South Carolina was the first. New York City was the second. The Hudson River Valley had as many slaves per square acre as Virginia. which is not very well known. That's the great Governor George Clinton, who was the vice president. So this was our first sign, and now I'm going to have to go into here. I'm going to go through a couple of different things and move into our interactive website. This has to do with the idea of whiskey for money, the idea of Native American rights, and how trade was used back in this era. And I'm going to jump back to the other artworks. It'll be a lot easier for me to go through this. You're not going to be able to see them as large, but that's okay. We'll just work through it. So we had a lot of different signs by different people collaborating with us. Because we opened it up, we saw this as a discursive space, and it wasn't just for a group of artists to put up artwork, their own artwork. This was really about messaging. And what we did, we went out and recruited a lot of different individuals and groups. This was epoxy, Asian American, not just Chinese American, Asian American group that submitted a sign. They would later become Godzilla and all these other, part of these other different groups. I'll just...
You're right clicking. Click on the left side of them.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. This has to do with civil defense, and also they were trying to build a nuclear port. They wanted Staten Island to actually have nuclear submarines and ships come into the New York City harbor, and there was a great deal of pushback against that. And this is kind of a serendipitous type of thing about the exploration of boxing, and also the idea of what human rights are, and how, and about the, and the exploitation of civil defense, which is kind of like this strange kind of idiosyncratic message. And you have to understand, these are actually the size of street signs. You see the sign above it? They were designed to be the same size and function kind of like alternative side of the street parking and some of this other signage. We wanted to, this was kind of it was a definite situationalist project. So the idea was that you would have these signs, and they look the same shape. But if you really looked at them, you will see that the images, the type, are totally different. Even this one that doesn't have an image, it has a lot of text. With this kind of dense text you'd never see on the street sign, really. So that they were kind of meant to blend in and for people to just come upon them and see them. One of the reasons for that, we thought at first we were just going to be a guerrilla operation, and we couldn't get permission to put it up. And then what happened, because of one of our members, Tom Clem, came in, and he was very influential in having other public artworks done, working with other people to get projects done, and he thought he could get us a permit. And then, of course, we got into LMCC, and they sponsored us for this, so we did get permission. So there was a lot of different kinds of messaging, and people were very open about this. And we allowed people to have the front of the sign was theirs to create what they would want. What we asked for is the back of the sign, and this was about homelessness, almshouse. Okay, this is a homeless man. This was Anita Moore and Andy Musili. Yeah, I haven't seen those people in ages. This is from '92. And so they interviewed him, and they had information about him on the front, but then there's a story on the back of each one of these signs to contextualize. So that, and you'll go out and you'll see them, they're all through the gallery, and then they're upstairs too. Vito Marcantonio was an important politician who nobody remembers now. He was actually a communist. He was well, they said he was a communist. He said he was a socialist. The old journalists all call him a communist. Vito Marcantonio was LaGuardia's protege. Okay? Very much, he was a congressman, and he was one of maybe the only person voting against the McCarthy era type of legislation that they were putting into place. So this multiple vision of what the city is, this hidden type of histories, these things that are forgotten, and some are suppressed. I think Vito Antonio, people don't want to talk about him. They don't want to have him as part of what the American vision is, our history is. We've had a lot of radicals throughout our history that their work has either been either attacked viciously or else just left out of the narrative. And of course, we were also reading Zinn's book, what is the name of that book now?
REPOHistory.
Yes, thank you. No problem with that. Just skip my mind. I want to get into, this is a sign that I put up in the project. It was part of the New York Stock Exchange, and it says the advantages of a free market, of an unregulated free market society. And it said that every major recession, depression since the 1890s was caused by deregulation and fraud. And when you look at what happened in 2008, it was pretty obvious that, that validated my claim. Okay, and now that kind of led me into working with Occupy Wall Street, because in 2008, I started something called the Air and Burr Society, which the Air and Burr Society was set up as a way of talking about the crash while it was still going on, the summer of 2008. I made a video I published on YouTube in October while it was still happening, saying that it was deregulation and fraud. Some of you might have heard of William Black. He wrote The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One. He was the only economist in Michael Moore's film. He's been on Bill Moyers several times, and I was in email contact with him discussing this before I made the video. He thought the Air and Burr Society was a little bit over the top. It's an absurdist conceptual artwork, but it's made to deal with these kind of things. And since then, I don't want to get into this too much, but I started something called the Second Whiskey Rebellion and the Free Money Movement, which actually blends in quite nicely to, this is Occupy Wall Street's Debt Resisters Operating Manual. This was created by Debt Strike, a group that I'm involved with Occupy Wall Street. The relationships, the economics of what the Air and Burr Society is in this book. Now, I'm not taking credit for it, please do not. I contributed somewhat, but also David Graeber, Andrew Ross, and some important, a lot of different people contributed. We were working together on these kind of concepts and ideas. So the idea of what REPOHistory was trying to do, it's part of an ongoing thing, and you'll have a room full of other artists that have other ways of approaching these kind of issues, not specifically these, but what these kind of issues are and what our relationship is to society. And part of the performances I do talks about, well, I'll just, gold and silver is not money. Money is a form of social exchange. Aristotle wrote that thousands of years ago. Benjamin Franklin understood that. He was enlightened, and that's one of the causes of the American Revolution. The people of Argentina in 2000 understood that, and they refused to pay their national debt. Last year, the people of Iceland not only refused to pay their national debt, they started arresting bankers and politicians. I think that America should be enlightened. We should start arresting politicians and bankers for collusion and what happened. The Debt Resisters Manual doesn't use that kind of language, but we are calling for a jubilee for fraudulent debt and debt that was created by collusion between bankers and politicians to create a fraudulent kind of debt or manipulative type of debt, which would include student loans, the foreclosures, the real estate booms, and many other actually different types of things. When you look about economics, and you understand that the cost of living has stayed flat for the last 20 years, okay, while prices are rising, and all of these things, what is that a form of economic manipulation? Well, if you listen to the Air and Burr Society, you understand there's no such thing as free markets and free trade. I think at this point in time, most people really believe that. So, with that transition, let's talk a little bit about what is also out in the hallway, which is the Repo Commons. And what's this? SX2, Paul, am I right on this? .net? .net, that's what I thought.
That's because you're not opted into name that space. You have to pick it.
Yeah. This is the alternative route. Paul's going to be talking a lot about this next.
So you talk about this, I'm going to continue on.
Well, I meant about namespace.
Yes.
And Paul and I
scroll up so they can see the slideshow while that rolls, right?
Good idea.
No, back.
I'm trying, hold on.
There you go.
That's a slideshow. Oh, wait, there's a slideshow, this one, okay.
Yeah.
All right, now, what happened was, we were invited to be part of the show, and then we were thinking, well, how, Greg and I were talking, we're thinking, what can we do to make it more dynamic? And Cooper Union offered to give us a little extra money to do something, so we suggested that we do an interactive project where people could actually upload their own artwork, and then that would be printed and made part of a public artwork outside of Cooper Union. So what we have is an interactive website, and of course, immediately I called, I was thinking of this when Paul, when we came up with these ideas, and we said, Paul, can you get something up and running for this? And Paul also, like I said, was he first hosted our website, but I've known Paul since the 1980s when he was with Namjoon, and I was with the Experimental Intermedia Foundation. Then we kind of went our different ways and hooked up again and with REPOHistory because Greg Chalet went to school with Paul here at Cooper. And yeah, secret capitalism ahead, there we go, caution. It kind of speaks for itself. A little text heavy.
Some people read
A few.
more than 140 characters.
Are you sure? No one does that anymore. So like last millennium.
All right, so is this enough?
Yeah.
Okay. And now Paul will be with you.